You're nothing but a fraud hiding behind a uniform. You broke this family, and you think these people can save you? Her voice shattered the hangar bay like glass under pressure. Over 100 sailors froze in formation, their eyes locked on the woman in crimson heels storming across the deck. My sister, Melissa Ward, had just hijacked my promotion ceremony. I stood in dress whites, silver oak leaves gleaming on the podium beside me, ready to be pinned as commander. Captain Cates had called my name moments before. This was supposed to be the clean break, the culmination of 12 years, multiple deployments, medals earned in storms and sand. But Melissa's arrival turned it into theater. She stopped inches from me. Her perfume clashed with jet fuel and salt air. Before I could brace, her hand whipped across my face. The slap cracked through the cavernous bay, echoing louder than any applause I had imagined, louder than any fighter engine overhead. My cheek burned. So did my pride. Gasps rippled through the formation. Sailors shifted, their disciplines straining against shock. My humiliation stood naked before them all. Melissa sneered, feeding on the silence. "You don't deserve this, Hannah." And then, thunder. Rear Admiral Daniel Voss, commander of the Carrier Strike Group, and my husband stepped forward. His voice detonated like a broadside across steel. "Touch my wife again, and see." The room stilled. Rank, authority, and raw fury fused in his words. Melissa's bravado shrank in an instant. The bay didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to him. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one standing alone against her. Hannah always ruins everything. Melissa said it when we were kids and never stopped. She said it when I tripped over the coffee table and spilled juice on her new dress. She said it when I borrowed her hairbrush. She said it when our parents fought, as if a 12-year-old girl could fracture a marriage simply by existing. By the time I was 15, the phrase had calcified into her brand of truth. Whenever something went wrong, Melissa leaned on it. A late bill? Hannah distracted Mom. A dented car? Hannah left the garage light off. Our parents, too tired, too entangled in their own disputes, let her words stand unchallenged. Melissa was the star of every room. She had a way of walking in as though she owned the air, and people rewarded her for it. Teachers wrote glowing comments about her leadership, even when she cheated or copied. Neighbors applauded her solos at church, even when her voice cracked. At family gatherings, she performed. Stories, songs, jokes, always drawing attention like a magnet. And me? I became the quiet one, the careful one. If Melissa was the flame, I learned to be the shadow. But shadows don't vanish. They wait. When I told my parents at 17 that I wanted to join the Navy, Melissa laughed so loudly the silverware on the table shook. "The Navy? You? You'll be crying for home before your boots hit the deck." Our father chuckled with her, shaking his head. "Sweetheart, that's not a life for you." But I had already met a recruiter. I had already seen the pamphlets, jets streaking across a cobalt sky, sailors saluting with steel in their eyes. I didn't want applause. I wanted discipline. I wanted purpose. Melissa saw it as betrayal. She called it running away. She told relatives I was abandoning Mom. She cried loud enough for the neighbors to hear. And when I left for boot camp, she staged a scene on the driveway. "Don't come back when it falls apart, Hannah." My parents stood behind her, silent. Not one word of encouragement passed their lips. Boot camp broke me and rebuilt me. While my hands blistered on obstacle courses and my voice cracked from shouting cadence, I carried Melissa's words like an extra weight in my rucksack. Every time I wanted to quit, I heard her voice mocking me, daring me to fail. And so I didn't. When deployment orders came, Melissa sent a letter. Not congratulations, not pride, just venom wrapped in cursive loops. Mom says you're selfish. Dad says you'll regret this. I say you'll never be more than a uniform with no one inside it. I tore the letter into strips, but I couldn't tear the words out of my mind. Even halfway across the world, over the roar of carrier decks and the heat of desert tarmacs, her voice found me. Still, I earned my wings. I flew sorties, touched down on steel runways in seas that swallowed the horizon, survived missions that blurred night into day. I collected ribbons and commendations, proof carved in metal that I was more than the shadow Melissa wanted me to be. But home never changed. On leave, I returned for Christmas once. Melissa met me at the door in a new dress, wine glass in hand, hair shining like a commercial. She hugged me as though for show, then whispered into my ear, "You think they care about your medals? They only care that you left." At dinner, she told stories about her job at the bank, exaggerated numbers, fabricated promotions. My parents nodded, clapped, smiled. When I tried to talk about flying, about the men and women I served with, she cut me off with a laugh. See, she thinks she's Maverick now. The table laughed with her. I learned to go silent. When Mom fell ill years later, I sent money, called often, begged for updates. Melissa told relatives, "Hannah's too busy playing soldier to care." She made my absence into proof of neglect. And when Mom passed, Melissa told me not to come to the funeral. "You'd only make it about you," she said. That wound never closed. So when my promotion finally came, commander after 12 years of service, countless missions, sacrifices etched into bone, I thought it might be the one thing even Melissa couldn't taint. I thought the Navy ceremony, the hangar bay filled with sailors who respected the uniform, would be mine alone. But I underestimated her. Melissa didn't just want to mock me anymore. She wanted to drag me back into her shadow, to turn the single greatest day of my career into another family drama staged for an audience. That slap in the hangar bay wasn't just an assault. It was the culmination of decades, her rage, her jealousy, her need to remind me that in her eyes, I would never be free. And yet, what Melissa didn't know was that the Navy had taught me something she had never learned, not in all her years of stealing stages. You don't win respect by grasping at it. You win it by standing steady in the storm. I had waited 12 years for the word promoted to land on my record like a clean stamp. 12 years of moving parts and moving ships, of landing a jet on a heaving deck at night with nothing but a box of light to trust. 12 years of being measured by checklists, flight hours, and the cold arithmetic of risk. The orders came through with none of the drama I expected. A notification on a secure terminal, a brief handshake from the XO, a formal congratulations from Captain Cates. Still, when I printed the message and held it in my hands, it felt heavier than paper had any right to be. The date was set. Promotion to commander. Ceremony aboard the USS Chosen, Hangar Bay. I carried the printout to my stateroom and set it beside a coin I kept in a shallow tray, matte black, edges worn smooth from years of worry rolling between thumb and finger. On one face, an anchor, on the other, a simple engraving, "Steady in the storm." It wasn't official issue. Pio Martinez had pressed it into my palm after a rough night launch 2 deployments back, when we brought a limping bird home on fumes and stubbornness. "For when the sky won't behave, ma'am," he'd said, trying not to grin. The coin had become more than a charm. It was my private order. I placed the printout under the coin and pressed down until the coin left a faint circle in the paper. Habit. Ritual. Make it literal and you won't drift. That week, the ship seemed to hum at a slightly higher pitch, as if it too was tuning for the note we'd strike in public. Captain Cates called me in with the ceremonial calm of a man who'd done this 100 times. "Ward," he said, "you'll have family?" I hesitated. I had learned to measure the risk in that word. "A sister," I said eventually. "Estranged." His eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Security will have a list. Give it to Albert on the pier." Albert wasn't his real name, but it fit. A retired chief who ran guest protocols with quartermaster precision. I handed over 2 names, Melissa Ward and, against my better judgment, Melissa's boyfriend, whom I had never met but had seen smirking in photos she posted from parties I would never be invited to. I didn't add our parents. That door had long since closed. 3 nights before the ceremony, an email slid into my personal inbox with all the sweetness of a poisoned candy. The subject line read, "From your favorite sister." The message inside was a collage of sarcasm and glittering needles. "So you finally got someone to clap for you without a costume party," it began. "We'll be there. Try not to crash anything." I closed the laptop and breathed until my pulse returned from its sprint. Then I opened the email again and read it aloud in a flat voice until her words lost their shape. I deleted it, emptied the trash, and picked up the coin. Steady in the storm. There are storms you fly through and storms you let pass over you while you keep the nose level. The morning of the ceremony, the sea was a polished sheet of gray, calm enough to make you think power was quiet by nature. Sailors chalked and chained in the hangar bay, riggers strung bunting. The supply officer cursed at a missing crate of coffee cups and then found it under his own clipboard. The band rehearsed a march that I could hum in my bones. I dressed slowly, not because I doubted the uniform, but because it fit like a final answer. Dress whites. Shoes that remembered every inspection I had ever passed. I pinned a ribbon rack over my heart, each color a scar I was allowed to show. On the way out, I slipped the coin into my pocket and tapped it twice with 2 knuckles, the way pilots touch the fuselage before boarding. Superstition? Maybe. But some superstitions are just muscle memory for gratitude. Rear Admiral Daniel Voss met me on the quarterdeck with that complicated smile of his, the one that carried both pride and preparation. We had learned, early in our marriage, to keep our edges clean in public. He belonged to the Sky and the Strike Group, and so did I, but in different orbits. Today, those orbits crossed. He didn't kiss me. He didn't need to. He extended a small box no bigger than a matchbook. Inside, a pair of anchor cufflinks he had had made from a decommissioned catapult hook. "For the suit you'll wear at the Pentagon one day," he said. "I'm not done with decks," I told him. "You'll bring the deck with you," he answered, eyes alight, voice low enough that only I could hear the promise. We took our places. The hangar bay filled. P.O. Martinez nudged into the back row of the formation, expression as solemn as a judge until he saw me glance his way. Then he let the corner of his mouth break rank for half a second. The chaplain hovered near the lectern with the look of a man rehearsing a blessing he wanted to land without smearing. Captain Cates practiced the script under his breath. Read citation, invite family, pin insignia, administer oath. Clean, crisp, no drift. That was the plan. Before the first note of the march, Albert radioed up from the brow. Guests inbound. A pause. One guest without proper pre-clearance attempting entry. Claims to be on the list. Cates glanced at me. I kept my face neutral. The Admiral's jaw flexed once, the only tell that he had just revised the map in his head. Cates spoke into his mic with the patience of a man who knew the value of friction. Follow protocol. It should have ended there. On a ship, protocol is gravity, but gravity can falter when someone throws a wrench at the gears. While the band began, while sailors turned as one, while I felt my spine align with a century of backs that had stood in front of flags with quiet pride, somewhere at the pier a gate badge beeped the wrong tone and then the right one. Albert's radio crackled again, not words, just a ripple. The hair on my arms tracked the frequency like weather. I didn't know it yet, but later, an IT petty officer would find the footprints, a temporary badge code generated seconds before entry, routed through a civilian contractor's compromised laptop. A clever little trick that looked like coincidence unless you knew what to look for. I didn't know it, but the boyfriend I'd never met had wanted to make sure Melissa could make an entrance. Mischief as foreplay, chaos as gift. Inside the hangar, it began like music should. The band found its measure, Cates's voice carried. The oak leaves glinted on the podium like a dare I intended to accept. He called my name. Lieutenant Commander Hannah Ward, front and center. I stepped forward, heels clipped clean against the deck. Sailors I had bled and laughed with stood straighter as if by reflex, as if their bodies wanted to make room for a story to complete its arc. I inhaled jet fuel, salt, and polish, scents that braided my life into something legible to me, if to no one else. Then the doors at the far end slammed open. That is not hyperbole. They slammed. The sound cut across brass and orders and ceremony like a blade across taut rope. Heads turned as one. Melissa's red dress hit the air like a flare. She moved fast, eyes bright with the kind of triumph that only comes from stealing a crowd. You're nothing but a fraud hiding behind a uniform, she spat, before she even closed the distance. You broke this family. And you think these people can save you? I should have been surprised. I wasn't. I had felt the storm edging the horizon all week. The only unknown was its shape. She reached me. The perfume, sweet, cloying, collided with salt and metal. Time is elastic in a crisis. I had learned that in cockpits and on decks. The hand came up, the slap came down, and the echo rode the hangar's ribs like a thrown chain. My cheek stung hot. My eyes did not water. The coin in my pocket dug into my thigh and anchored me to the deck. I heard the hitch across the formation, the involuntary intake of breath that happens when something wrong breaks a pattern. The band faltered, the last note hanging like a question mark. Cates lifted a hand that could have been a command or a warning. And then the voice I knew better than my own cut through the wreckage. Touch my wife again and see. Rear Admiral Daniel Voss didn't shout. He didn't need to. He spoke at the volume of authority, which is to say, he spoke as if the ship itself had decided to have an opinion. Conversation died, because conversation knows when it has been outranked. Even Melissa froze, her arm half-turned toward a second act that would never come. Eyes swung toward him, toward the broad gold stripes on his sleeve, the crest that wasn't ornamental, the posture of a carrier strike group on 2 feet. He stepped between ceremony and intrusion with the measured calm of a man who had stood on bridges in bad weather and directed chaos to heal. He didn't reach for me. He didn't need to. His presence did the reaching. Melissa tried to laugh. It came out small. So now you need a man to... Cates cleared his throat like a warning buoy. This is a United States Navy vessel, he said, voice clipped. You will conduct yourself accordingly, or you will be escorted off it. The hangar bay recalibrated. In that recalibration, subtle, absolute, something else shifted too. The energy of the crew. Rumor was sprouting even then. I could feel it. Sailors are botanists of narrative. But beneath the quick growth of whispered, "What the hell?" and "Did you see that?" a slower root dug in. The way they watched me watch myself. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I stood where I stood. That was my plan, and this was where it started. Not with a grand gesture, but with a refusal. My sister had dragged the past on board like a ringer. I would not step into the ring. I would stand as an officer. The rest would take care of itself. Cates leaned toward the mic, a veteran finding the beat again after a dropped measure. Proceed. His eyes flicked to the Admiral, a question asked and answered in a breath. Proceed, the Admiral echoed, not to Cates, but to the room, to the idea of order itself. Melissa hovered, undecided. The bravado that had carried her through the door wavered in a headwind she hadn't anticipated. Chaos is confident until it meets consequence. Two masters-at-arms appeared at her flanks, the way professionalism does. Quiet, ready, not eager. They did not touch her. They didn't have to. Presence is policy. I faced front. The coin in my pocket felt warm now, as if the brass had absorbed the heat of my cheek and fed it back as strength. Cates lifted the oak leaves from the felt pad like a priest raising a host. By the authority vested. His words threaded the room, old words said for new people, and I let them stitch me to the moment I had earned. When he pinned the silver leaves to my collar, the metal bit honest, and I welcomed the bite. The band found the cadence again. The chaplain's brief blessing landed clean. The formation exhaled in unison, a silent cheer disguised as oxygen. I raised my right hand and took the oath again. Not because I had to, but because we say the words we mean out loud when history tries to drown them. My voice didn't shake. I spoke each syllable like a rivet. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw P.O. Martinez at the back. He stood a half-inch taller than he had at the start. Later he would tell me, "Ma'am, you didn't even blink." That wasn't true. I had blinked. I had simply refused to become the blink. After the formalities, Cates nodded for remarks. I could have said anything, thanked mentors, called out the Admiral, offered a parable about weathering storms. Instead, I chose economy. Crew, I said, thank you for your work. It is an honor to serve with you. We will keep the standard and take care of one another. That's it. Applause rose, not wild, not staged. Solid, like boots on deck. The Admiral didn't clap longer than anyone else. He didn't need to. He had already said the only sentence that mattered. Security guided Melissa toward the exit. She made a show of smoothing her dress, of tossing her hair back like this had been her idea all along. Her boyfriend, who had somehow melted into the edge of the crowd, avoided the Admiral's gaze with the survival instincts of a fox that had finally noticed it was in a dog yard. The ceremony closed on time. Photos were taken. Hands were shaken. The ship breathed, relief masked as routine. Behind the scenes, protocols tightened like knots. The IT petty officer followed the digital breadcrumbs with grim efficiency. The masters-at-arms filed incident paperwork in triplicate. The Admiral spoke to the captain in low tones that meant, "We will not make a meal of this, but we will not ignore it either." When the hangar emptied and the echo of brass dwindled, I stood alone for a minute beneath the prefabricated ribs of the ship that had carried us all without complaint. The air tasted like metal and something else, like possibility crisped at the edges by fire. I touched the new leaves at my collar, then pressed 2 fingers to the coin in my pocket. 12 years had led to this day. I had thought the catalyst would be the promotion itself, a clean sunrise after long weather. Instead, it was the collision, the way past and present had slammed together, and, in slamming, revealed what was load-bearing. Strength wasn't silence. It wasn't revenge. It was standing firm in chaos until respect became undeniable. I was promoted, in front of my sailors, in front of my sister, in front of the man who commanded the sky and, for one necessary sentence, had commanded the room. The slap had not defined the day. The standing had. When I stepped off the deck, P.O. Martinez was waiting by the hatch, hands behind his back like a schoolboy trying not to fidget. "Ma'am," he said, "congratulations." Then, quieter, "We got you." "I know," I answered. I meant it for more than him. I meant it for all of them. For the crew that had seen me absorb humiliation without leaking dignity. For the chain of command that had closed ranks around standards rather than gossip. For the ship that had held steady while a storm passed through wearing a red dress. I walked the passageway with the new weight at my collar and the old coin in my pocket. The catalyst had done its work. Nothing would be the same. Which was another way of saying, everything I needed to be true had been tested and found true enough. Outside, the sea kept its counsel. Inside, we adjusted the watch bill, updated the visitor log procedures, and returned to the work that keeps the country from learning our names. Promotions are punctuation, not endings. The sentence continues. I was ready for the next clause. After the slap, after the Admiral's thunder rolled across steel, after Melissa was escorted out, the bay returned to order. But I knew the chaos she had unleashed wouldn't vanish overnight. Rumors don't just fade in a command. They either rot into poison or they turn into loyalty, depending on how the officer at the center of the storm chooses to stand. That was my choice. That was my plan. First, I refused to retaliate. Not then, not later, not at all. Melissa had wanted me to descend into her arena. Family drama, sharp words, a brawl disguised as grievance. If I swung back, if I raised my voice, if I so much as rolled my eyes in public, I'd prove her right, that I was still the little sister locked in rivalry. So I gave her nothing. I gave the crew everything. Second, I doubled down on professionalism. The morning after the ceremony, Captain Cates called me into his ready room. His face was carved into the neutrality of a man who had seen storms before. "Ward," he said, "do you want to file an official complaint against your sister?" The silence between us lasted longer than the question. I kept my shoulders square. "Sir, I want the report to reflect that the ceremony concluded on time. The command maintained order. Nothing more." His eyes flicked, sharp, weighing me. Then he nodded once. He understood. My silence wasn't weakness, it was discipline. He would record it that way. Third, I lived the schedule harder than ever. 0600 inspections, on time. Every uniform crisp, every bunk checked. I walked the rows with posture so exact that sailors noticed the rhythm, not the sting on my cheek. Flight drills? Tighter, sharper. I logged more hours on simulators, led more sorties, briefed and debriefed with clarity that cut through fatigue. If anyone wondered whether the slap had rattled me, they saw the answer in the clean lines of my work. It had not. P.O. Martinez said it best in the galley one morning, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "Ma'am, you stood there like steel." That's why we follow forth. I trusted the chain of command. Rear Admiral Voss didn't speak of it again. Not to me, not in public. He didn't need to. His one sentence in that hangar had already set the perimeter. Melissa was not just a sister. She was an intruder on his ship. That line carried more weight than 100 punishments. I let his authority hold where mine could not. Captain Cates kept the ceremony report as bland as white paint. No disruptions, no delays. That was a gift in its own way. He knew, and I knew, that careers aren't built on avoiding storms, but on how the logs read after them. My log would read clean. Fifth, I reframed the symbols. The slap had been public, the pain private. But symbols matter in a command. I took the coin Martinez had given me years earlier, steady in the storm, and placed it beside the silver oak leaves in a shadow box on my desk. The crew who visited saw it there, side by side. The emblem of honor I had earned, and the order I had chosen. Some asked about the coin. I told them the truth. It was given to me the night we saved a bird that shouldn't have flown home. It means you can survive anything if you stay steady. They nodded, silent, understanding that the coin also now meant something else, that you could survive humiliation, too. Sixth, I refused to let Melissa define the narrative. In family circles, she had always owned the story. She was the one who charmed, who shouted, who mocked until her voice drowned mine out. But on the ship, on the deck, in the Navy, rank and respect rewrote the script. I didn't need to answer her. My crew had already chosen who to follow, and that was the heart of the plan. Not to fight Melissa on her terms, but to let her collapse under the weight of her own theater, while I stood steady on mine. Days passed. The rumors mutated as rumors do. Some sailors embellished the Admiral's words. Some turned the slap into legend. But beneath the embellishments, a truth grew roots. Commander Ward had faced chaos in her own ceremony and hadn't flinched. That story mattered more than any medal I had ever worn. By the second week, I noticed the shift. Sailors saluted me with a fraction more crispness. Not because of rank, but because of respect. Martinez stopped me in the passageway, coin in his hand, and said, "We knew you could have snapped." "You didn't. That's why the crew's with you." His words weren't flattery, they were fact. That was the moment I knew the plan had worked. Melissa had wanted to drag me down. Instead, she had given me the stage to prove who I was. Not in the heat of combat, not in the roar of jet engines, but in the quiet discipline of composure. My plan wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was stronger than any slap. And when the next storm came, and I knew it would find me standing in the same place, unshaken. The hangar bay of the USS Chosen was alive with ceremony. Rows of sailors standing taut, aircraft chained in perfect alignment, brass gleaming beneath fluorescent light. My silver oak leaves glinted freshly pinned against my collar, the moment I had worked 12 years to earn. This was supposed to be the clean punctuation mark. Oath spoken, rank conferred, respect sealed. But storms rarely ask permission. The hatch at the far end of the bay slammed open. The sound cut through the hum of ceremony like a shell cracking steel. Melissa Ward. She stepped in wearing a crimson dress, red heels striking against navy gray, her chin tilted up, eyes bright with the thrill of spectacle. She wasn't just crashing a promotion ceremony, she was staging a show. And behind her, half concealed at the hatch, was her boyfriend. He wore a contractor's badge, the kind that grants access to supply zones but not to secure ceremonies. Somehow he'd slipped her through. The crew stiffened. Rumors of the first slap had already traveled the ship, multiplying in detail. Now, every sailor had a front-row seat to the sequel. The master-at-arms on the edge of the formation glanced at Captain Cates, awaiting the smallest signal. Security was ready to move, but the captain held his hand low, waiting. It was a delicate balance. Ceremony versus disruption. Discipline versus escalation. One wrong move, and the Admiral's flagship ceremony would collapse into chaos. Melissa's voice sliced the air. "So this is Commander Hannah Ward." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "The Navy's golden girl? Still pretending you belong?" Her words weren't new. I had heard them across kitchen tables, in venom-laced letters, whispered at family gatherings. But here, in this hangar bay, her voice clashed against silence disciplined by years of training. She strode toward me, her heels clicking out defiance. My jaw tightened, but my spine stayed straight. She came close enough that her perfume mingled with jet fuel and salt air. Her hand twitched, threatening a repeat of that first slap. The sailors nearest to us tensed. 2 master-at-arms moved in, ready, but before they could close the gap, a voice rolled across the bay. "This is my ship." Rear Admiral Daniel Voss stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of authority sharpened over decades. He wasn't speaking as my husband. He was speaking as the Carrier Strike Group commander. Every sailor felt the shift instantly. Spines straightened. Silence deepened. The air itself seemed to obey him. "No one," he continued, his eyes locked on Melissa, "family or otherwise, disrespects my officers here." Melissa faltered for the briefest moment. Her bravado flickered. She had always thrived on attention, but now the eyes of the crew weren't hers. They were the Admiral's. They were mine. She sneered, desperate to claw back the stage. "So what now, Hannah? You hide behind your husband's stars?" The Admiral didn't blink. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His next words landed like a broadside. "Touch my wife again and see." The hangar bay went still. Not empty, not afraid. Still. A silence so complete it felt like steel holding its breath. Melissa froze, arms suspended between intention and humiliation. She searched the faces around her, young recruits, seasoned chiefs, officers standing in witness. None gave her the attention she craved. Even the youngest sailor looked through her, neutrality colder than contempt. That was when I realized. The rivalry that had defined our childhood no longer held power here. This was not her arena. This was mine. The Admiral flicked his gaze toward the master-at-arms. Permission. Silent but clear. Security closed in. They didn't shove or drag. They simply moved with the inevitability of tide. Melissa tried to step back, but each retreat clattered against steel in a rhythm that betrayed her. Her voice rose in a weak protest. "This isn't over!" But it sounded paper-thin, shredded against the silence of the crew. At the hatch, her boyfriend shifted nervously. He had hoped to vanish back into shadows, but another master-at-arms was already moving toward him. A petty officer from IT jogged in, breathless, holding a printout. "Admiral, sir, unauthorized system access confirmed. Temporary pass was generated from this badge ID." The Admiral's head turned, gaze locking on the boyfriend. "Detain him." The clink of handcuffs snapped through the bay. The boyfriend's smirk collapsed. In that moment, the spectacle Melissa had come to stage became her undoing. She hadn't humiliated me. She had humiliated herself. The hatch sealed behind them with finality. The Admiral turned back to the crew. His voice carried no anger now, only steel. "Order is not fragile," he said. "It is enforced." Captain Kate stepped forward, steady as keel. "Formation dismissed." The sailors obeyed, boots striking the deck in measured rhythm. But as they passed me, one by one, their eyes said what their mouths couldn't. Respect. Not born of pity, not of rumor, but of something witnessed and tested. I stood still, heart pounding. Silver leaves pressing into my collar like a brand. Melissa's words had cut air, yes, but they had not cut me. Her slap had left a sting, but my silence had left something stronger. Proof. For the first time in my life, the story between us wasn't hers to tell. It was mine. And I had told it without a single word. The steel door closed with a final thud, swallowing Melissa's scream into silence. The sound lingered in my bones like the tail end of thunder. For a long breath, no one moved. The hangar bay was suspended between ceremony and chaos, between humiliation and dignity. Captain Cates broke the silence with the voice of keel and consequence. "All hands, return to stations." Boots struck steel in perfect rhythm. The crew dispersed, but their eyes didn't leave me until the last possible second. No one smiled. No one whispered. They looked at me as if they had seen something proven, not by medals or speeches, but by steadiness. The Admiral stepped forward, his stars catching light. He didn't touch me, didn't whisper comfort. His gaze was enough. A silent verdict. You held steady. Then he turned away, giving the deck back its order. In the ready room, the air smelled of burnt coffee and copier toner. The logbook lay open, blank lines hungry for ink. Captain Cates sat with pen poised, expression carved into calm. "We'll keep this clean," he said. Unauthorized civilians entered the hangar bay. Immediate removal. No injury, no delay to readiness. Ceremony concluded. He looked up. "Remarks, Commander?" I let the silence settle. My pulse had slowed by now, though my palms still carried the faint half-moons of where my nails had pressed. "No remarks, sir." His pen scratched across the page. The sound steadied me more than any words could. The Admiral spoke without turning from the porthole. "NCIS will handle the civilians' access breach. Your sister is barred from base. Public affairs will not comment. Neither will you." "Yes, sir." "Good. You have a squadron brief at 1400. Give them certainty. Let the rest of this starve. I initialed the log. The ink glistened, then dried. 1 page in a book. Nothing more. But sometimes, discipline lives in what you don't write. Later, in the passageway, Martinez stood at attention near a bulkhead, clipboard in hand. He looked too stiff, like a man rehearsing composure. When he saw me, he blurted, "Ma'am, we," then stopped himself. He swallowed, then managed, "We're proud to serve with you." I let my shoulders ease just a fraction. "I'm proud of us, Martinez. Now keep moving." He grinned, sheepish, and disappeared into the ship like a coin dropping into a slot. That night, I returned to my office. On the shelf sat the shadow box. My new silver oak leaves beside the black coin engraved "Steady in the Storm." The glass reflected a face both weary and sharpened. I lifted the coin, turned it in my hand. It had warmed to my skin, as if it remembered Bahrain dust, Pacific spray, the sting of humiliation endured without breaking. I set it back carefully, aligning it with the edge. My inbox pinged. One subject line froze me. Nomination, PAC Lex Leadership Program. I opened it. Bureaucratic words, clinical sentences. Commander Ward has demonstrated exceptional composure under pressure. Nominated by Rear Admiral Daniel Voss and Captain Julian Cates. Selection panel convenes next month. At the end, she is steady in the storm. I read it twice, then let my hand rest against the desk. No tears came. I'd cried for wings, for friends lost, for family betrayals. This wasn't a moment for tears. It was for breath, one long exhale that felt like releasing years of weight. A knock at my door. "Enter," I said. Martinez again, holding a small velvet pouch. He placed it on my desk, awkward as a junior sailor caught breaking rules. "From the crew, ma'am." "Open it later," his voice cracked. He fled before I could answer. When the room was quiet, I loosened the drawstring. A coin dropped into my palm, heavier than it looked. One side carried the silhouette of the USS Chosen. The other, words etched by machinists' hands. "We saw, we stand." Around the rim, the date of the ceremony. I pressed my thumb against the letters until they warmed. Then I set the new coin beside the old one. Truth and proof, side by side. Days turned into procedure. NCIS interviews, a memo tightening visitor protocols, news that Melissa's boyfriend faced charges for unauthorized access. Melissa herself left me one last mark. A letter. Real paper, delivered through civilian post. I hesitated before opening it. The handwriting was familiar, loops and flourishes that had mocked me since childhood. Inside, her voice tried its old tricks. Grievance coded in apology, blame disguised as confession. "You've always made everything about you. I was just trying to show them who you really are. Mom would have wanted us to stand together." And then, one line, raw and unvarnished. "You've turned them against me." I folded it once, slid it back into the envelope, and filed it under family, closed items. Not shredded, not displayed. Archived. The past deserved no more than that. A week later, the Admiral handed me a small box before morning quarters. Inside, a second set of anchor cufflinks, cut from steel once used in a catapult hook. On the lid's underside, 3 words: "Bring the deck." That night, under hangar lights, I walked the exact stretch of steel where Melissa had raised her hand and the Admiral had raised his voice. The bay was quiet now, aircraft chained, deck crews gone. I stood alone, but not lonely. Family, I realized, isn't blood. It isn't applause. It isn't who shouts loudest at the table. It is who shows up, who tells the truth, who stands with you when the wind shifts. That was what Martinez had done with a single reflexive, "Ma'am." That was what the crew had done with silence that swallowed Melissa's words. That was what the Admiral had done with one line that redrew the map. Strength isn't silence or revenge. It isn't the absence of storms. It is the practiced art of standing firm until respect becomes undeniable. When my orders for DC came, I packed 2 coins. The old one, steady in the storm, and the new one, we saw, we stand. I carried them in the same pocket, side by side, proof of where I'd been and what I would carry forward. At the brow, Martinez saluted too sharply. "Bring us back a better Navy, ma'am." "That's the only kind I know how to build," I said. I pressed the old coin into his hand. On its rim, freshly engraved, "We stood," and the date. The Admiral walked me down the pier. He didn't give speeches. He only said, "Say what the deck would say." Nothing more, nothing less. I nodded. "Aye, sir." The flight east carried me above an ocean that no longer looked like escape, but like home. At 30,000 feet, I touched the coins in my pocket and let the memory of steel, of silence, of loyalty root me. Melissa's shadow was behind me now, not vanished, but powerless. Ahead, the Pentagon waited. Between them, only air I knew how to cross. And for the first time in decades, I felt no ache in the word family. Only anchor. Only truth.